finally, the last thing under this rule says that for every pesticide that is being stored, a hard copy of the complete label shall be made immediately available for inspection to the department's inspector at the site where the pesticide is being stored. This is one of the reasons why I don't store any pesticides on location. I have a home-based business. I work out of my garage, and I don't want to store pesticides in my garage. Later on, when we start talking about proper storage of pesticides, we'll talk more about how some of the requirements and inventing requirements for these chemicals can be rather expensive. And so I don't want to get into that, and I don't want to have to keep more labels and all of that. So what I do is whatever pesticides I'm going to use, I keep it on the truck. I store it on the vehicle, and then as I use it up, I replace it. That way, I'm only required to have those labels and that stuff in one place. I don't store pesticides on site, and so I don't have to keep copies of the labels on site for that. So, but if you do store pesticides on site, you need to make sure that you have a label, because one of the things that they will ask you when they come to do the inspections is they're going to say they want to see where you store your pesticides, and they will ask you for a copy of those labels of the pesticides that you have stored on your property or on your premises. Okay, now let's take a look at Rule 7.152, and this rule talks about advertising. And under this rule are things that that you need to know, especially when you're talking to other customers. And it starts off like this: a licensee must not use false, misleading, or deceptive advertising. Examples of statements or representations which constitute false, misleading, or deceptive advertising include the following. The first one is a false or misleading statement concerning the composition of the product used. The second is a false or misleading statement concerning the effectiveness of a product as a pesticide or device. Okay, so what they're saying here is you can't be making up stuff. That, or if you just heard something and it sounds good, or you think something about a product, you need to make sure that what you're saying is right, especially if you put it in writing or in advertising. All this information, it can be looked up. It's online. It's in the labels. It's in the MSDS sheets. You can find all the information you need to be able to tell a customer professionally and thoroughly and honestly what a product has in it and how it works and what it does. So it clearly says here, don't be telling people that products will do something if they don't do it. So there again, you want to read those labels, and you want to understand them and make sure that you understand what's in those labels, what they say that the products can do. If the label says a product can do something, then you can advertise that. You can say that. You can tell customers that. But if the label doesn't say that, then you can't say it. Number 3, a false or misleading statement about the value of the product for the purpose other than as a pesticide or device. So you can't make any false statements about the value of something. A false or misleading comparison with other pesticides. Okay? So if you're going to make comparisons with other pesticides, make sure that you understand what you're saying, you understand the science behind it. There's a lot of brochures that are out there on just about every pesticide made, and some of them will even show you charts that will compare other pesticides and what they do. So if you're going to tell a customer that one pesticide will do something and another pesticide won't, if you can show them that it's printed out on a chart, that will, help lend legitimacy to what you're saying. That people will believe you, and they can also look that up, and it'll lend credibility to what you've told them. So it's important that when you're talking to people about what pesticides can do or cannot do, and you're comparing them to other products, that you are telling them right. It's not just important that you do this on a business standpoint, but it's important because it's actually the law. The law says that you can't mislead people in any way. So if you're telling them that a product can do something that it cannot do, that's misleading them. So there's where it's very important that you understand your products, what they can do and what they cannot do, and that you be forthright with all your customers. Forthright means to be honest and to the point. And remember what the Bible says, to whatever you do, to do it with all your heart as though you're doing it for the Lord and not for man, right? So whatever you do, do it like you're doing it for God. Be honest about it and be forthright about it. Know your products. Know what you're saying is right, so that when you tell somebody something, you know that it's right. And you have the material to back it up. In other words, you can go and pull out a brochure and show it to them, or they can go online and they can look it up. And then that lends credibility to you and your company. Another thing under this rule in advertising, it says, a statement directly or indirectly implying that a pesticide or device is recommended or endorsed by any agency of the state or federal government, such as the EPA, or saying that it is EPA approved. Okay? If you're going to tell somebody that a product is EPA approved, you better make sure you read the label and that it is. Don't tell them that something is registered or approved if it is not. Also, a true statement used in such a way as to give a false or misleading impression to the consumer. Okay? You cannot give a statement to a customer in any way that's misleading or untrue. Remember, be forthright, be honest, and be to the point. The customers will appreciate it, and you won't ever have any trouble with the law. Okay, now here's another one that you really want to pay close attention to. This one says that you're not to make claims as to the safety of a pesticide or its ingredients, including statements such as free from risk or harm, safe, non-injurious, harmless, or non-toxic to humans and pets. None of these statements you can say. You can't say pesticides are safe. Even if the label does say that, then they're breaking the law. They'll get in trouble later on, and believe me, the EPA will make them change that label. They won't, because you can't say that a pesticide is safe. It's not. If it's a pesticide, it's dangerous, and it needs to be treated that way. Now, it may be true that some pesticides, it doesn't seem like it's going to harm you. You can touch it, nothing's going to happen. And it might be true that you might have to, say in the case of some pesticides, you might have to drink a whole bottle of this for it to kill you. And who would do that, right? So maybe just touching it or getting into it, it might seem safe. You might, and you might be tempted to tell people when they ask you, is the product that you're using safe? And you might say, oh, it's very safe, no problem, harmless. No, you can't say that. It says that right in the law. They even have the word that you cannot say harmless. You cannot say the word, and it's in quotes, safe. You cannot say that. So what I tell people when they ask me if a product is safe, I explain to them, well, it's a pesticide, and all pesticides have dangers. But when we use it the proper way, you're not going to have to worry about your family or your pets getting into this product. And it's true. If you do use the product by the label, If you mix it the way the label says, you don't let people in the area while you're applying it like the label says. If you allow it time to dry properly before those people enter back into that area like the label says, and you do all these things, then it has really lowered any chance of harm that it can do, right? But still, you can't tell people that it's safe because it's still a pesticide. But you can tell them that what you're doing is labeled to use in hospitals and nursing homes. It's labeled to use in schools, and that you're a professional and you're applying it in a way that they do not have to worry about that. That you can tell them. Rule 7.156, entry and access. This law or rule has to do with the Department of Structural Pest Control Services, a right to be able to come in and inspect you and basically do their job. This is the rule that gives them the right to check you out and issue you citations and that kind of stuff. So let's take a look at this rule, Rule 7.156. It says, the department may conduct investigations and inspections of the structural pest control activities involving any person in this state to determine compliance. Okay? Interesting how they worded that. In other words, you don't have to have a license, be licensed by the state for them to be able to come in and inspect what you're doing. If they suspect that you are using pesticides and you don't have a license, those are really some of the main people that they're after, are looking for the people that are trying to do pest control business without a license. So they have the right to go in and check those people out, as well as people that do have a license. So let's take a look at what that law says. It says that in conducting an investigation, the department may enter the premises of a licensee, business, or the facility during normal business hours to examine records, question witnesses, inspect pesticides and equipment used for pest control, and collect samples. So they have the right to come in to your business or on the work site where you're working. They've got a right to come in and take a look and ask you what you're doing and see that you're doing it right. If you have a tank of pesticide, a 50-gallon tank of, say, termiticide mixed up out in your tank, and you're doing a termite job, and they might come along and they're going to ask you, what are you using? They want to look at your bid sheet. They want to look at the chemical use sheets and see what you told the customer that you're going to be using. They're going to see what you say the percent of active ingredient is that you're going to use. And then they have the right to go over to that tank and dip their little thing down in there and get a sample, and they'll send that to the state and they'll test it and make sure it is what you say it is, that it's the product you say it is, and that it's at the active ingredient that you say it is. Not only do they have the right to do this, but they do this, and they do it quite often. This is one of the things that they do, that they're allowed to do, and their job is to enforce these laws, and that's what they do. So if you tell a customer that you're going to use Termidor SC at 0.03%, and you're going to apply 100 gallons around the house, and the inspector comes out and you don't have that product in the tank, or it's not mixed at that percentage rate, or you're not using enough product, then you can get cited for that. Maybe even probably lose your license, or have it suspended for a couple of years. So you want to make sure that, once again, what you tell customers you're going to do, that you're honest about it, and that you do what you say you're going to do. Anything that you write down, that you put in writing, you want to make sure that you do what you put in writing. And the structural pest control has the right to come along and inspect that and check you out and make sure that you're doing what you're telling the customer you're doing. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, and the next one says that they are also allowed to enter the premises where individuals are performing or are suspected of performing pest control operations to inspect the use of pesticides and devices, check employee credentials, collect samples, identify pests, and inspect equipment. So, if you're telling a customer that they have carpenter ants and you're out on a job and inspectors comes by and sees your truck sitting out there with its TPCL number written on the side of it, he might just decide, well, I got enough time, let's go check these guys out. And he'll pull over, and he has the right to come into that customer's house and inspect and see what you're doing. He's going to look at your sheet, and if you wrote down on there carpenter ants and that's what you're treating, and he's going to look and see, and he's going to identify the pest, and if that's what the pest is, no problem. But if it's acrobat ants instead of carpenter ants, then you got a problem. So not only is it important that you know how to read these labels and that you understand what pests that you can kill with them, because for instance, let's say you're applying a pesticide and those kind of ants might not even be on that label, then you could get in trouble for that. And if you have identified those ants as carpenter ants and they're actually acrobat ants, you could get in trouble for that as well. So these could lead to fines, and they can lead to suspension of your license and other trouble. And also, if you're doing that, then you're not really being very professional. So it's real important that you not only understand your pesticides, understand the labels, but you also know your pest and know the target pest. You need to know what it is that you're trying to get rid of or control, and you need to make sure that that's on your label and you're using the proper product and that you're using at the proper percentage that label says that it needs to be done. So they have the right to come in and inspect you while you're on the job and make sure that you're doing that anytime. So remember that. It shouldn't really matter, because if you're doing your job right and you're being a professional, then it doesn't make any difference. You should be able, when you see that inspector, to say, hey, how you doing? Here's my clipboard, take a look at what I'm doing. Here's the pesticide. Show them your containers, show them that they've been labeled, show them that you have labels for them, and that the target pest is on that label. More than likely, that inspector is going to be familiar with the pesticide you're using and the target pest and know what's going on. So do things right, and then you just don't have to worry about those problems. And also, when you do things right, you're identifying the right pest, you're using the right product, you're doing it at the right percent of active ingredient, you're getting rid of a problem for a customer, and you're doing it in a safe way where you don't have to worry about injuring them or their pets or the environment around them. Being professional is very important, and following the label is all part of being professional. Okay, this law also says that they're allowed to come on public property, inspect pesticides and equipment, and question employees of persons conducting or suspected of conducting structural pest control activities. So they can come on, and if you have a helper, and that helper is just hired to dig ditches, they're allowed to talk to them and make sure that that's all that they're doing is digging ditches. Because now if they're helping you pull hoses out and roll them back up, you might be in trouble, because that could be considered as helping to apply pesticides. Anything that has to do with, if they're touching the devices that are used to apply pesticides or applying pesticides, then they're going to have a license for that. But there again, with that being said, not everybody has to have a license And so they have a right to come into that job or onto that property and ask the people that are working for you, whether they're licensed or not, ask them what they're doing and make sure that they're in compliance with the labels and with the law and the licensing. So there again, when you hire somebody, if you're just hiring somebody to dig ditches on a termite job and you know they don't need to be licensed, make sure that they're not applying any pesticides. Make sure they're not drilling holes or something that could be considered an application in any way, and then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, and it says finally that any licensee who interferes with an employee of the department attempting to enter or access property shall face disciplinary action. And you could also be receiving a revocation of your license and or your registrations. So if they come and they do their inspection, don't interfere with it. Just by making things difficult for them to do that or denying them to do it, not cooperating with them, not working with them, it's written in the law that you cannot do that. And by doing that alone can cause you to get your license suspended or even revoked. So you don't want that. Stay in compliance, follow the laws, follow the rules, then you don't have to worry about it. That's the best way to go. Okay, now let's take a look at 7.161. Rule 7.161 has to do with revocation. In other words, getting your license revoked or suspended or taken away, or refusal to allow you to take an exam, for instance, any of those kind of things. So let's see what the law says here. It says the following are grounds for revocation, suspension, penalties, reprimanding, refusal to exam, and refusal to issue or renew a license. So these are some of the reasons why they can refuse to renew your license or give you a test. Misrepresentation for the purpose of defrauding. If you put down anything that is false on your application and they find it out when they're checking it out, they can deny you. Or if they find out later on, they can revoke your license. Engaging in an advertising practice prohibited in this rule. We talked about some of those things that you cannot do, being false statements, misleading or deceptive practices in any way. If you're in business and you start doing things deceptive, misleading, false, people will turn you in. Remember the consumer information sheet that you give to everybody. That sheet is designed so that they have the information that tells them who to call and report those things, and they will. They'll call and report you, they'll investigate, and if that's what's going on and they feel that you're not being a reputable business in Texas, then you don't deserve a license, and they will revoke your business license and your applicator license or whatever they have to do. They won't allow you to do business in Texas. So it's a privilege to be able to do pest control in Texas. You have to earn that privilege. So follow the laws and obey it. And if other people are not following the laws, then you should report that, because you've paid a lot of money and you've worked real hard to be licensed and to be insured, and others should follow those laws as well. Okay, so another reason that they could deny you a license or suspend your license or revoke it is, it says here, because has been convicted of or has pleaded guilty to a felony or a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude. Okay, so if you've had a felony or even a misdemeanor, they're going to want to look at your records. It doesn't mean that just because you've had a felony that you're going to be turned down by any means. That does not mean that. And just because it's only a misdemeanor, it doesn't mean that you're going to get a license either, because they will take a look. They're going to look and see what the law was, what you did, and then they will determine whether or not they feel like it's safe enough to allow you to be going into people's houses and into businesses. Because when they issue a license to you, then that's telling the people that those people whose houses you're going into, the state is telling them basically they've checked you out and you've been licensed and that you're trustworthy. They're going to have to take a look at it and then determine. So if you send in your paperwork and you tell them that you've had some criminal history, they're going to send you back asking you for some more information. They're going to want to know all about it, when it happened, what it was, and what you did to describe it to them and explain it to them. And then they're going to sit down with a board with other people, and they're going to talk about it and decide fairly whether or not they should allow you a chance to get a license. And then, and if you do, then they'll mail back that information to you. So just because you have some criminal history in your past, don't let that discourage you. Try your best. Own up to it. Let them know what you did. Let them know that you've worked through it, or where you're at on that process, and just be honest. Be forthright. There again, be honest and upfront about what's going on. They'll take a look at that and then determine, and they'll go on from there. So don't give up. Keep trying. Okay, so some other reasons you could lose your license. Engaging in pest control practices in a manner that could be injurious to the public health, safety, or the environment. There again, just follow the labels and you won't have to worry about that. Failure to comply with contract specifications. If you put something in writing, they're going to check on it, make sure you're doing it right. And if you're not doing it right, then you could be, you're not in compliance, and you could be in trouble for that. Some other things you can lose your license for. Let's see here. Failure of business licensee or certified non-commercial applicator to register the employees or to pay the license fees. So every year, once you get your license, then you have to renew that license and pay the fees. If you don't, they will suspend or revoke your license if you don't renew it. Sounds simple enough. Have to renew your license. Failure to make records of pesticides use and keep them available as required by the Act. Okay, we've talked about this before. Pesticide use records, you have to maintain them and keep them. It's not just one of those things where they would like you to do it. If you don't do it, you will lose your license. You have to maintain those records. Very important. Failure of a business licensee to notify the department when a certified applicator or apprentice leaves their employment. So when you leave employment, you are to notify them as well as the business. They have to notify that you're not employed with them anymore. So it's not a secret. When you lose your job, the state will be notified by the business that you no longer work there. And you're also, by the way, required to notify them as well. And if you don't, you can lose your license. On the other hand, if you do things right, if you follow the law, if you get licensed, and if you advertise right, and you sell to people right, and you treat them right, you do what you tell them you're going to do, if you, in other words, go out and whatever you do, if you do it with all your heart, as though you're doing it for the Lord and not for man, then you're going to do just fine. You'll probably be very successful at what you do, and I think you will really enjoy working in the pest control industry. Thank you, and God bless you.